Uh, yep.
Okay,
Welcome
we are
everybody.
recording.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Welcome everybody to the Cooperative Forecasting Group meeting on August 27th, 2025. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes, I'll approve. This is Kathleen from Carroll County.
Motion to approve from Carroll County. Do we have a second? All right.
Second.
We have a second. So all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
Hi.
Okay, the ayes have it.
Hi.
All right. Um, Next item on the agenda, we'll turn it over to Matt for discussion on the population data dashboard updates.
All right, I'm going to go ahead, stop sharing that screen and move on to sharing another. Okay, everyone should be able to see the dashboard that I have previously shared with you. So this we've discussed in our previous meetings. We ran through this in June. And the day after we had our June 25th meeting on June 26th, the Census Bureau released new population estimates that were broken down by age and sex and race. So these are going to be the updates that we're going to be looking at today. So this data is going to show in a few different formats what we're going to be looking at. So on this dashboard, you'll see that we have the, wait, there we go. Now we're back at where we need to be. So this is the homepage that I've shared with everyone before. Um, there are going to be three new dashboards that are added in under this age structure and dependency rate right here at the top. So the first that we're going to have shows jurisdiction level population estimates for three age groups or cohorts, along with the youth and old age dependency ratios that I calculated with that as well. So those will represent the share of the population per 100 individuals that are dependent on the working age population. The second is going to include a similar presentation of kind of jurisdiction population, but with an expanded age group breakdown. So instead of having the one age breakdown for the working age population, we split it into three. And then for our final update to the dashboard, this is going to contain the data that is for all jurisdictions across race and sex and the population breakdown for each of those. So just to go ahead and do a walkthrough of these, again, you'll get to this page. If anyone needs the link reshared, I can definitely do that. But this is the same link that as everyone has been shared before. So whenever you get here, this is going to be what pops up whenever you go to Tableau Public. So the first thing that you'll do is click into age structure and dependency rate. And this will bring you to the new dashboard or the new landing page for these dashboards. It has some updated information here just to explain the updates that were made and the new data that's contained, and also how to access the raw data if you need it, or how to download that data directly from Tableau Public.
Matt,
Yeah,
maybe it's just me, but I'm just still seeing the static slide. I'm not, if you're maneuvering in Tableau, I'm not seeing it. I don't know about anybody else.
yeah. Has it changed at all for anyone?
No, I'm just seeing the first slide.
Yep.
Hmm. Okay. No change?
Now it's
Now,
population estimates.
now it's the Tableau.
Yep.
Great, thanks.
Did it just go back to that landing page?
It
Yeah, it
did.
just went back.
Okay, perfect.
Cool. That's
Thanks
what
for
you
pointing
meant
that
all
out.
along.
Yes. Okay, so can everyone see that it says population estimates by age group, sex, and race at the top of this screen? Yes.
It's the landing page right now.
Yes. And it should have the 4 separate breakdowns with return to home page at the bottom. Okay.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
right there at the top, we'll have the first one, which is going to show age structure and dependency rates. So whenever we click into that, we should get some nice 2 little charts that are color coded for our local jurisdictions and then for every other county in Maryland as well. So what we'll have here is at the top, these dependency ratios. So youth dependency ratio, we calculated that as being 0 to 17. Some consider working age population to be 0 to 15. I do have that, or 15 to 64 instead of 17 to 64. I have the breakdown that can be added in. This is just the most common. So I included this, but if we want to have it for working age being 15 to 64 instead of 18 to 64, I can include that as well. So again, this will just show this is calculated as the number of persons that are age 65 plus divided by the number of persons age 18 to 64. So the working age population. So just for example, we'll pick on Anne Arundel County to where their old age dependency ratio would be 24% for the year of 2020. And over to youth, it would be 36. So all this is saying is that that is the share of the population within these counties that is dependent on the working age population for economic inputs. And down here at the bottom, we'll have those age breakdowns again. Yeah. Was there a question? No. Okay. So like I said, it'll be by the 3 age groups. We have population 0 to 17, 18 to 64, and then age 65 plus. This right here at the top is going to be your year breakdown. Though we cannot view these in their entirety at present because it is not able to be calculated that way in Tableau. I may be able to pull it up to where we can see overall dependency ratios. But right now we view them by year. So you'll be able to go into this year box, select 2024 if you want the most recent, and everything across these will update. Your age shares and your dependency ratios. So this, again, a nice tool. Sola, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if we needed to wait till the end of the presentation, of if I can jump in and ask a quick question. How does that sound?
Jump right in.
Okay, sounds good to me. So yeah, thank you, Matt. From the home page, I saw that you named on the home page, I saw that you named it as dependency rates.
Mm-hmm.
I know that demographic rates are actually not exactly the same as demographic ratios, but I know a couple of times people kind of use them interchangeably.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that. I don't know if that's something to consider, but I'm wondering if the right name on the dashboard should be should be dependency ratio or dependency rates.
I did realize that I did have it represented 2 separate ways. I think I'll go back and update it to just dependency ratios to where we can actually show what we're actually calculating here. So that's a good call out. I can definitely update that in the Tableau.
So what are the ratios? What is divided by what to determine those percentages?
This is going to be for youth age or youth dependency. It is going to be population 0 to 17 divided by that population 18 to 64. And for old age, it is those 65 plus divided by that share that is 18 to 64.
Okay. And is that indicated in the notes? Oh, there
Yes,
we go.
I have it right there.
All right, thank you. All right.
Yeah, no, of course. I like to include that in there just because, whenever you're looking at these type of calculations, it's nice to know how they're done.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Matt, can I ask a question? This is Austin from Baltimore County.
Yeah, of course. Go for it.
Is there a Is there a ratio that would indicate like the health of a county or an ideal kind of range or the difference between the two dependencies?
There is, but that would need to be independently calculated, I believe, because it is going to differ based on population share and kind of uh, overall population size in the area as well. But I can definitely try and find a kind of healthy rate for what would be the ideal for this kind of share for the old and youth age population. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Baltimore County is 31.98
Yeah.
old age dependency, and 36 for the other. Both of those seem pretty healthy, I guess. Pretty
Yeah.
balanced and okay.
It is. It is pretty balanced. It's definitely not on to the scarier or heavier side to where you'll see with certain populations that have a larger share of those that are 65 plus to where those rates can significantly increase. I think the highest we have here right now is going to be in Caroline County at 42.16 for youth. And then we've got 52 in Kent for old age.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Any other questions on this particular dashboard? And as always, feel free to reach out to me whenever y'all start to dig into this and we can make updates. These are relatively easy to update depending on the types of requests that I get, but we can improve the style of this, the visuals, and the information, how it's presented if we need to. So to get back to that landing page, we're going to go back to the same home button that we have on all the others. You'll click that, and this will take you back to the new landing page for these age structure breakdowns. And in our next one, we'll have population estimates by age group and race. So this is what we are going to see whenever this pulls up. Like I said previously, this is going to give us those 5 age level breakdowns instead of the 3. All that's doing basically is splitting our working age population, our 18 to 64s, into 3 different groups. We have the 18 to 24, 25 to 44, and 45 to 64. So it's giving you a more descriptive breakdown of what those populations are looking like. Within this dashboard, you can scroll through all of the racial breakdowns for all of the counties that we have provided if you are looking for doing comparisons. If not, if you just want to look at the one jurisdiction, you can click on Baltimore City up here. It is going to highlight all of these figures, and then it is also going to restrict this bottom table to only show the racial breakdown for that specific jurisdiction. I broke it down into 12 racial categories that we have. So American Indian, Asian, Black and African American, Native Hawaiian, 2 more races, and then white. And then for those that are non-Hispanic. For these top 6 categories, that is going to include those who would identify as Hispanic as well. So whenever you're looking at these numbers for comparison, if you are looking strictly for the non-Hispanic population, it is down here. And again, whenever you're needing to look at different years, you go to your year box at the top, it will update everything throughout. Whenever you click out of a jurisdiction, it is going to bring it back up down here in the table to where all jurisdictions are available. Again, it is just a more descriptive breakdown of those age groups. And then again, where you'll be able to see these 5-year age groups or 4-year age groups by racial category. So if you were curious as to how many Black and African American individuals between the age of 25 to 29 are in Baltimore County, or that's Allegheny, sorry, there it is. And whenever you click on that, it will pull up that little box right next to it that will show you the age group, the jurisdiction that you're looking at, the racial group that's selected, and that population number as well. So this is just a quick way to get some of those statistics that are normally pretty difficult to find through normal census data types. Do we have any questions with this dashboard? Okay, I don't see any hands or anything in the chat. And then we'll move on to our final dashboard, which is going to be the larger of the three, as it contains the majority of the information. So this will show age by sex and by race and by year. So whenever you're looking at this, it is pretty daunting at first. It is a lot of information that is kind of just presented to you right up top. But what this is going to allow you to do is go in and choose an individual jurisdiction. We'll do Baltimore City. You can go in and either check the race boxes that you would like to see, or you can go in and exclude them as well. So whenever you're going in, if you would just like to see certain portions of the population for their race, you can click this off, and as you will see, it'll start to restrict that down. You can do the same for a year, where if we just want to look at the past year, it is going to reduce all that down for you. And again, if you're just looking at one specific level of the population by sex, you can do that as well. This is just a easier access format.
If you do select that, can you then download the data or copy it and paste it somewhere, that kind of thing?
You should be able to download it in the extract format as you select. So clicking through these, it should be able to extract it in the format that you're currently seeing. So if you restrict this down to men in 2022 for Baltimore City that are non-Hispanic Asian, you should be able to extract just that specific data set instead of pulling it all.
And then how do you do that? Do you just grab it and save it kind of thing?
You can copy and paste it. Honestly,
Uh-huh.
if you're doing it directly into an Excel sheet, I have found that easier.
Okay.
But there are the options on Tableau Public. I have this pulled up on my desktop right now, but
I see.
there will be a section to where let's see, we have the instructions down here. So whenever you're able to do that, you'll have that extract available.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But honestly, sometimes copying and pasting is going to be the easier way to do it, especially in this table format.
Right. Okay.
I have a description down here just to ensure that everyone knows where the racial categories are being broken down by. Again, I know that this is going to be a good chunk of data, but this was honestly the easiest way to present this to where it was still going to be pretty descriptive for the overall population as well. Always happy to make edits due to accessibility or any issues that anyone has for navigating this. But for now, this is what we have for viewing this data. And I promise you, it is a lot better than the raw format of the PEP data whenever it was released. So again, racial breakdowns by age group and by sex across all of our jurisdictions. And whenever you're done here, you'll be able to hit that. And then this return to home page will bring you back to the initial dashboard that we provided. And all of the original dashboards are still there. No changes have been made to them. They still maintain the same level of data, except there will be those that are for pre-2020, where the new population updates that I've included by age and sex and race will only include the 2020 to 2024 numbers. And as always, feel free to reach out with any recommendations or questions. I am always happy to chat.
Are you, can you provide the link
Oh, absolutely.
for this? I'm kind of trying to look for it on the site. I'm having trouble finding it.
Hannah, did I just send that to you? I did. Sorry, I had the wrong chat pulled up. All right. It should have just popped up in the chat.
I see it. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. And I'll include this within the meeting notes whenever they are shared as well. So I'll make sure that everyone has that updated link.
Okay, great.
And-
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the dashboards for Matt? Okay, if not, we'll move to Zach and Hannah for a presentation on scenario planning. Hannah has been very busy making the rounds doing these presentations.
Yes.
So good to see you again.
Yes, good morning. So I'm Zach Kaufman. I was the project manager for BMC on this effort. So the scenario planning project is intended to inform the development of the next LRTP. And so with the long range transportation plan includes projects that we anticipate implementing in the region, in the next 20 to 25 years. And we do some modeling incorporating the CFG's forecasts of household population and jobs to assess the potential impacts of those projects. But that's essentially one scenario. And we know that there's a lot of uncertainty about the future. So this project was about exploring that uncertainty and looking at various policy options that could potentially be incorporated into the LRTP. So Hannah Twiddell is going to be presenting from ICF. They were the consultant on this project, and Jonathan Slayson is also here from RSG, another consulting team working on this project.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Are you seeing an opening slide, title slide for this presentation?
Yes, long range transportation plan. Yep.
Exploratory scenarios. Great. Thank you so much. So I think a number of you were at some of the workshops that we did for this. And so these early slides kind of reiterate a little bit of the backstory that we shared during those workshops. But we've been doing a lot since May when we had our first set of workshops on the first round of scenarios we developed for this project. But broadly, our overarching goal is to come up with some new ideas and concepts that we've explored in a data-driven way to incorporate into the long range transportation plan update that's kicking off around now, right? So pretty soon it'll be a very busy part of what we're doing. And of course, your work on forecasting is pretty critical to that. And so some of what I want to try to encourage us to think about today as a group is these various scenarios we developed in this additional tool, Vision Eval, that sort of complements the travel model, but it's not the same thing as the Insight travel model. How we might be able to reflect some of the really interesting conclusions in the not only the long range plan concepts and ideas and strategies that are explored, but also perhaps some consideration around how we might logistically incorporate the modeling data into the long range plan analysis together. So process has been going on for almost a year. It started with some research, discussions with other entities and agencies that have used this tool, Vision Eval, which is a publicly available free tool that you can download from the Federal Highway Administration that is designed for this kind of strategic modeling exercise. And by the way, Matt, since I'm probably not going to, I might not see hands raised, just, let me know if somebody has a question where this is pretty informal here. But we went through a first series of running a large array, about 1,500 different scenarios with lots and lots of possibilities explored, and then shortened down to a smaller subset of scenarios to take a look at what we're going to talk about today. The performance measures that we developed for these scenario evaluations, the outcomes we were looking at, all relate to the long-range plan goals. So everything from mobility and accessibility type measures to safety and environmental measures. Those all are fairly, normal standard measures that we often look at in transportation planning. We also kind of cross-referenced almost all the outcomes we were looking at in terms of taking a look at how the results might differ for some portions of the population or the region. And so we did some subsets of all the scenario outputs to take a look at how the impacts affected areas that were identified as the lower opportunity areas. This was back in the regional fair housing plan that a lot of you might remember. That this index was developed by BMC. And so we have that geographic split out of the lower opportunity areas, the higher, and then the other areas in the region, which we just sort of nicknamed higher opportunity areas. So where we could, we had those kinds of findings cross-referenced. We also did develop some mapping and some data around the impacts, future impacts of flooding and inundation exacerbated by sea level rise and more frequent storms. So we didn't do a lot of analysis around this particular layer. We looked at it and sort of qualitatively considered some of the impacts within light of this, but this is one where I think this data layer might be helpful, more helpful moving forward when we begin to get into modeling in the long range plan, where we have the full transportation network, the roadway system all modeled in detail, which we intentionally don't to have that kind of detail in this vision eval model so that we can run these thousands and thousands of scenarios more quickly. The first set of scenarios involved three kinds of what we call policy levers. So this is, give me the right lever and I will move the world concept of the word lever. Policy levers are the sorts of things that public agencies can do to influence the direction and outcomes of growth and development in our region. So types of transportation investment policies, the way we spend our money on transportation, types of land use and community development policies, which this particular group is very intimate with. So how we might want to use our regulatory tools and financial incentives to direct residential growth and job growth in the future, and then also transportation related fees or incentives. So things like a vehicle miles traveled fee, for instance, where it's essentially a pay-as-you-go kind of tax that several communities around the country are experimenting with or have put into place, or a congestion fee like New York City has had. They've had great success with it in terms of some of the outcomes they were looking for, where you pay an extra cost to drive into the city during peak rush hours. So we took a look at those policy levers, both in the original round of scenarios, and then we fine-tuned them for the second round that I'm going to talk about today. In the first round, we also kind of stress tested those results of those different policy lever impacts and possibilities against some of the outside forces that might change the underlying conditions in which these various futures are happening. And so we did, in that initial run of scenarios, just take a look at what if this result works or performs well under the projected future. What if the economy changes and we have far fewer jobs? What if the way people move around changes and we have a lot more self-driving cars or shared ride? Everybody's in a shared ride vehicle. And what if changes occur in the natural environment? So out of that initial set, and these were the sorts of things we talked about at the workshops back in May, for those of you that were there, we just found sort of big picture that one of the types of policy tools that consistently seem to have a lot of leverage in terms of producing desired outcomes like more multimodal transportation trips, lower vehicle miles traveled and emissions, lower costs of housing and transportation, particularly transportation, seem to be influenced most strongly by the way we located potential future additional housing growth. If we located around near jobs, if we located it near existing transit networks, or if we did some combination of that. That was a particularly powerful, impactful strategy. We did note, however, that every time you increase bicycle pedestrian activity, get more trips, the crash rates among those users tends to go up, just as it does with vehicle traffic. More traffic typically associates with more crash rates. The only strategy to ameliorate that is to intentionally put in some literally safeguards. So having more safety countermeasures to help mitigate that typical, otherwise correlated outcome. We did not go to the step of putting that particular countermeasure into the modeling we did, but what you'll see as we go through the results here is that those crash rates tend to just track with volume of activity, and we're aware of that, and that is one of the key things to look at in the long range plan is how to begin coming up with some of those safety countermeasures that ameliorate that. The other sort of most impactful policy tool, were the fees. So taking some kind of a fee, congestion fee, VMT fee, that really has a big impact on travel behavior. And so when you either all by itself or when you combine it with some of these coordinated transit and land use policies, you really see some shifts in the outcomes we're trying to accomplish. But of course, again, comes at a trade-off with increasing cost of travel for everybody who drives. And so, again, that's one of those trade-offs to think about in the long-range plan process and to try to fine-tune in the follow-up modeling and long-range plan that will happen over the next year or two. The policy levers that we fine-tuned for this second set of scenarios that I'm going to show you now involved splitting up the transportation investment packages that we were looking up into just transit and other types of transportation investments, making those kind of unique packages there. And then having some land use development scenarios that were basically the same as the ones in the first run we did, and a set of fees and incentives that were also pretty similar to the first run we did. I might pause here if it's okay and see if Dan Pontius wants to just take a minute to talk about why and we came up with the concept of adding 90,000 additional households to the model for these future scenario purposes, because they really did have a big impact on some of the results. So Dan, did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I can just kind of try to explain how this kind of emerged. We've just, I don't know if folks are aware of this regional fair housing plan, but we did one in 2020 and just updated it for 2025. And this year, because of some of our work on racial homeownership gaps, we were looking at the overall supply of housing because there's a lot of national attention to this about there being an undersupply of housing that's driving up rents and for sale values as well. And so we had been paying a lot of attention to this up for growth calculation that calculates that for the people who are already living here, because we're not forming households at the rate that we were in the year 2000, that we essentially, just because of that, have a shortage of 32,000 housing units in the region. And then last year, some folks may be familiar with a Moore administration bill in the 2025 General Assembly called the Housing for Jobs Act, and that was essentially striving for a housing to jobs ratio of 1.5. And they calculated at the time that we are short, the Baltimore metropolitan area is short 90,000 households or housing units if we wanted to achieve a 1.5 housing to jobs ratio in the Baltimore metropolitan area. So we use that 90,000 figure. We wanted to explore because this is sort of a a blue sky kind of what if X happens type of exercise. We wanted to explore what if we were able to add housing over and above the forecasts to this region. And so what we did for these scenarios, because of those two calculations, was that we assumed that out of that 90,000 households, 30,000 would just allow people in our region to spread out, form new households, and that 60,000 of the 90,000 would actually be new households that would be able to come to this region. Possibly people would be able to live here instead of commuting from Pennsylvania, or people would be able to come here and take jobs that would otherwise be unfilled, that kind of thing. So that's where we got that 90,000 figure, and that's how we kind of worked things in the various scenarios.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
And we intentionally put together the transit policy inputs in our model so that we could sort of mix and match them with those land growth scenarios, so that they could be looked at separately and together. And those four versions of these transit investment patterns and additional housing growth patterns reflect, concentrating them in this map to the left around, as I said, existing transit systems. Second option was to really focus them more around job centers. These are areas where there's high densities of jobs. The third is to kind of do a half and half, distribute them sort of evenly between transit and job centers. And then finally, to just put them in using the same pattern that was used for the 2050 plan forecast of residential growth. So just bump up what the forecast that you all put together said, which is the sort of most closely reflects local plans and policies.
And if I could just
yeah.
jump in, I just realized
Yeah.
one more thing that I should have mentioned.
Mhm.
Well, one thing as we were working through these scenarios, this 90,000 home shortage is for right now. So, and obviously in these scenarios, we're projecting out to 2050. And so when we did that, we don't get anywhere near a 1.5 homes housing to jobs ratio in 2050. So that's just something to keep in mind, that we realized like 90,000 sounded like a lot when we started out, but it doesn't, if a certain jobs to housing ratio is something that we're shooting for, we don't get there in these scenarios. So it's just something to keep in mind.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Could you explain maybe I missed this part of it, the fees and incentives? Because like for a more rural county that doesn't have, good transit and you have to travel far, to get to some population centers. I mean, I'm looking at the top, like 80 cents per gallon, then a little bit lower, it's, 5 cents, things like that. Is that like deliberately putting fees onto, gas or using your vehicle to now
Well,
for
that's
then what about isn't that penalizing potentially more rural county, and particularly the poor, where you have to travel distances to get, I mean,
oh yeah, no,
to me that's concerning.
This is the big debate around, and the trade-off around using these kinds of tools is that, as long
It's
as
penalizing,
most of
the
us
more
depend
rural
on,
counties
it
that
definitely
have,
has an equitable distribution of burdens and benefits, right? Impact. And the more you drive, the more you have to drive, the worse, the worse these kinds of fees will hit you. And so there's a lot of debate. You're raising exactly the right concern.
right. And then
And
there's some elderly, and
Mhm.
then,
No,
who have to go to
there's
doctors and go to, get their medical treatment, and
right.
sometimes they go distances, have to,
Yeah, long distances. Yeah. And so I think regions that have worked to try to impose some of these fees, and this exercise was even just looking at whether it made any difference at all. And you might be interested to see what was worth talking about more and what's really not worth the struggle to even get there. Does it even help us? But yes, when it's impactful enough to really look seriously at having a fee, then the conversation really becomes about how do we make this as reasonable and fair as we can, both in terms of having transit and non-driving alternatives available to all the people that need them and want them, and also mitigating, creating programs just like we sometimes do with tolling or with other kinds of fees or even just regular taxes, where we sometimes will have policies in place to waive the tax, for people of a certain income level or something. So those kinds of strategies typically go along with any kind of imposition of a fee. So the long, serious conversation you have, and it needs to be worth it. So yeah. Any other questions about the model inputs before we move on to what we were seeing? All righty. So the way we use the model, this vision eval tool, you basically put together little packages. If these are sort of like these squares, these boxes here are almost like little playing cards. So right now we have 4 little boxes, and each one represents a different kind of policy strategy that you could apply. And this little scenario would look at what happens if we just did these 4 things together. If we focused on making a higher diversion into biking and walking in urban areas and away from driving. If we bumped up transit near existing transit, if we added households near existing transit, and if we had a higher gas tax. So that's an example of one type of scenario we put together. Another example would be to mix and match the cards, if you will. So take that scenario we just had, but instead of the level 1, if we will, transit and land use policies, we try applying the level 4 ones, where we had transit and housing spread around the region. How does that impact the outcomes that you get from that first package? So you'll see how those start to get put together in some of the outputs we see. I'm going to walk through a sort of a 5-step process and show you the results of each step now. What we first did was just take a look at each of the types of investments on their own. So just kind of picked one at a time and took a look at some of these outputs like job access and VMT and delay. And then we said, okay, so of those transportation investments, which ones were the most high impact combinations? And we start putting those together, transit and other transportation investments. And then narrowing down which the most impact land use policies, testing those with and without those transit policy decisions, narrowing down again to the most high impact combinations of all and any of the transportation and land use options. And then finally layering on the fee options and seeing if that boosted any of these results or changed things in such a way that it was worth pushing that conversation forward. So that first step, where we just took a look at each of those little playing cards in the transportation scenario pack. So if we looked at just increasing urban bicycle and pedestrian transportation as an alternative to driving, which is that TI1, right? TI2, which was boosting our participation by commuters in transportation demand management programs like carpooling, ride sharing, and working from home, which is the WFH symbol. What if we did TI3, which was effectively increasing roadway capacity, so allowing vehicles to move a little more quickly and efficiently, either by systems management and operational techniques like reversing lanes during congested direction of lanes during congested hours, or coordinating signal timing better so you don't have so much stop-start, or just adding roadway lane. And then the transit options that are the maps we looked at a minute ago, right? So 4 ways of organizing additional transit. And what we kind of see here is that, the TDM and work from home policies seem to move the needle just a little bit more on most of the indicators we were looking at than some of the other policies. And then the focusing transit really around anything except that sort of region-wide model, but even the region-wide was a little less impactful than the more clustered and focused ways of organizing transit investment. But adding more transit tended to have positive impacts no matter what you did. So that told us, let's narrow in a little further and pay more attention to those in terms of the transportation investments, the TDM and work from home policies, and the transit investments that sort of cluster in investments around jobs or transit or both. So that's the next step. Let's zero in and take a look at what happens when you start combining more transit with some of those more powerful policies like TDM and work from home. And what we see here was that regardless of which way you organized your transit investments, you got pretty similar benefits across the board. Typically, I'll just sort of say this verbally, I didn't have room on the screen to add more detail to the charts, but they will be in the reports that'll be coming out in September for those lower opportunity areas. In general, whenever you see increases in transit or bike or walk trips, they're typically higher in those lower opportunity areas. So usually they're going to get a little more benefit in terms of those results. Anytime you're clustering your transit investments in a certain way, particularly around existing transit and jobs, that usually was the most impactful for that subpopulation. And they typically tended to benefit more in terms of reduced exposure to emissions and vehicle miles traveled, traffic, and so forth. So for the most part, every time we had sort of this investment in transit and bumping up housing in a clustered way, it usually had a more positive impact and reduced costs a little bit more for those lower opportunity area households. So it was kind of an added incentive to consider those further. So basically, the addition of those TDM and work from home policies boosted the effects of increasing transit in a sort of focused way by lowering the costs a little bit more, increasing more walking in transit, and decreasing some of the negative impacts of vehicle traffic. That's kind of the upshot there. So then the next one is let's add in household growth. Remember, up till now, we've just been using the 2050 forecast of households. So now we're boosting the transit investment with the housing growth that Dan was describing earlier. And so we're taking a look at the percentage increase. And again, all the numbers you're seeing here on each of these charts is how much of a percentage change from the 2050 plan outcomes are we seeing when we try out these different combinations of policies. And again, you could really sort of see zeroing in kind of on the middle of center part of that table, focusing household growth plus transit investments around jobs and transit evenly, or just around jobs, either way, do really start coming up with some, consistently higher level or consistently positive outcomes. You see lots of scenarios where you get one or two outcomes that you want, but the organizing household growth and transit investments around some combination of something that involves existing jobs plus existing transit, or future jobs, and future transit is really seems to be more and more compelling, right? So growth in general, this is the first step where we've added those 90,000 households. It increases everything, so positive and negative. You start seeing increases in job access, even though, as Dan said, we don't necessarily meet that ratio of jobs to households we might be looking for. It improves access to jobs. More jobs are available within a certain travel time to the households in the region. Increases trips by all modes, but also increases the negatives, right? So having that growth focused tends to mitigate some of those negative outcomes like emissions and delay and boost some of the positive ones. And then when you put the two together, adding transit to your focused growth, you get even further boost in some of the types of walk trips and transit trips you want to see, and a little bit more mitigation. So again, we're kind of building a case here for thinking more, seriously about that power of that combination of focusing growth and transit around household growth and transit closer to jobs. And so that's one of the consistent findings we're seeing. So in that next to last step here, we wanted to bring back in those other transportation investment policies one more time, see what happens if we take our high performing scenarios and put them together with some of those other kinds of investments like urban area, bicycle and pedestrian activity going up, or TDM and work from home policies, or roadway capacity policies. And what we're seeing, it shouldn't be a surprise now because we've been seeing this theme running through each step, putting together that household growth and transit investment around jobs with some mix of jobs and transit, and then layering in that TDM and work from home policy increase. We again sort of start to see a consistent cluster of benefits that is a little higher than what we see from many of the other combinations of policies. So growth with transit increases everything, but the transit helps mitigate some of the negative impacts of the growth and helps to boost some of the positives. The TDM work from home policies give us a little further benefit, particularly in terms of reducing costs, which even though it's a slight reduction, when you're talking about a big region, that can have an impact. And then I just wanted to point out that increasing roadway capacity it does yield some benefits, but there's also a little bit of a feedback loop there where we see the potential for traffic to be attracted to, faster, smoother roadway lanes and kind of erode a little bit of the benefit initially. So that's one of the policy questions that happens when we start talking about how much do we want to invest in roadway capacity. Typically, the efficiency investments, the systems management operations ones, it could kind of have a more long-lasting positive impact than just increasing capacity. But either way, you have that issue. So finally, we layer on the fees and take a look. And so this is where we say, is it worth kind of talking further about some of these options? And interestingly, the 50% increase in the current gas tax, which is around 50 cents something, doesn't really bump up the numbers in any particularly compelling fashion much, nor does the lower 2.5 cent VMT fee. You don't really start seeing changes in travel behaviors that have a ripple effect on things like vehicle miles traveled and emissions and job access. You don't start to see any of those impacts really start showing up until you introduce that 5-cent fee. And of course, you do see costs 2% higher than what we have in the reference case model. If we do nothing but the 2050 plan model. And then if we layer on top of that 5-cent fee, some additional fees like a congestion fee for just urban area travel and urban parking fees, we do bump up, all the results, positive and negative there, costs, but also emissions and delay and so forth all go up or down, as the case may be, but in a positive direction. But maybe not in some cases by as big a margin as they do when you just put the VMT fee in place. So that becomes sort of the question of, talking about fees is painful. So you want to go with what's going to have the most impact and consider, how much it's worth, building more and more on that. So looking to us like maybe if we talk about fees, that 5-cent VMT fee might be a good place to start and have that, start thinking about that possibility and all of the complexities and concerns that get raised along with it. How do you strategically do that? Yeah, comment or question?
Did the model at all look at the impact on disabled and elderly? For instance, they wouldn't be able to bike and walk. I happen to live in a community where I see a lot of extreme mobility issues. So in a more rural county, I'm not going to see my neighbors riding bikes or walking.
Right.
I'm just kind of concerned that.
Oh yeah.
About
no, you're
that.
absolutely right.
That the model doesn't look at that. How are you going to mitigate the effects and impacts? Because and also, walking and biking. I mean, that's all dependent on the weather, things like that. And the safety of the road.
Right. These, I think these results are really intended to trigger exactly the kind of conversation you're bringing up, which is that at a broad brush, these things can have move us towards our desired outcomes, but they come with trade-offs, and they need, we need, for the ones that are worth looking at further, which to us really seem like, focusing transit and housing growth a little bit more closely around jobs, maybe considering a VMT fee or some kind of a equivalent to that. It didn't have to be that particular kind of tax, but something that generates that kind of effect. And then including more TDM and work from home policies. I will say that for the most part, the bicycle and pedestrian investments and outcomes are usually happening just in those urban areas within this model. And John, you can correct me if I'm wrong or elaborate on that, but just in terms of what the model does, it's already kind of assuming, those bike and walk trips are really being only applied to the ones that are feasibly bike and walk. So it's not necessarily assuming that there's big changes in biking and walking rates out in the middle of the countryside where trips are already pretty long. So these changes to the regional patterns, travel patterns and behaviors we're seeing in terms of the bike and ped interventions are typically going to be, kind of the effects of what happens when those changes happen in urban areas. So for what it's worth, it's a little bit nuanced, but I think you're asking the right questions about, yes, this can have a region-wide benefit, but we need to talk more and do some more modeling and analysis to look at.
We got to look at all populations.
Who wins and who loses, and how much do you want to stratify exactly?
And,
yeah.
And which population are you burdening? So people with fixed income, think so.
Yeah, exactly. And
I
some
just
of that
hope
is
that these
captured.
Models consider all populations.
And some of that is captured. Some of that is captured in the lower opportunity area sort of subset of results that we were looking at. But it is still at this scale that we're looking at. We're still doing it all as a whole region. And I think a good next step would be to begin to focus a little bit more on certain geographies or certain subpopulations and do some additional thinking about the nuanced effects and strategies for mitigating or improving. Maybe it's a case for better rural transit and investing seriously in that, so that may be something that happens out of that.
But, Hannah, could I elaborate just a minute? I think just to answer some of the specific questions is that you're absolutely right about the bike and pedestrian interventions are really only those households that are deemed eligible for those types of trips. So that would be shorter trip lengths as well as more dense mixed use urban areas. So the rural areas just wouldn't be told they have to bike if we increase that intervention. So most of the time, the vehicle trips will still remain the predominant mode. The VMT and the gas taxes will affect it, and it will increase the cost of travel. And that's what Hannah identified, that then interventions can be designed afterwards to address inequitable application of those costs. So this is more of the broad brush initial entree to that policy. But the model also accounts for ages of the households and whether there's employed persons or not. And each of those aspects influence whether they would travel, how long, how much they travel, and we're able to then kind of summarize the data. How do households of certain ages behave differently relative to the overall population, and how do households with different income profiles behave or are affected by these interventions. At this point, it's completely agnostic or ignorant of disability, physical ability to travel. And so it treats every household as having the ability to walk, bike, or transit or take a car. So maybe that answers some of those more detailed questions.
Right, right. But it does tell us exactly what I'm thinking about here, which is sort of what are the next steps here? What's the food for thought here? So, exactly that kind of equity question right up front, right? Or just balance question, reducing those commute trips with TDM programs or work from home policies, encouraging more of that. Works great for some, not so much for others. The model does account for that to some degree already, and our assumptions about, the kinds of households that were contributing to that positive result from work from home. I think we limited, we kind of constrained the analysis and said, let's just only take the homes with the areas with job types that are amenable to working from home. So we did a little bit of stratifying there to begin with, but I think that's one of those policy questions that if we really want to get into that kind of an intervention that seems to be pretty powerful on many levels, how are we going to balance that in terms of both promoting work from home for some kinds of jobs, but also advancing transit, carpooling, ride sharing for other types of commute trips. Those have to be done sort of simultaneously to get that benefit. I mentioned the trade-off earlier about the induced trips. Second set of food for thought, coordinating transit and residential growth with jobs, both existing and future job growth. Really getting that process of investing and growing closer and closer together is important. One of the sort of interesting little side oddities we found in the modeling process was that if you look back at that map of where the job locations are that we tried out putting more housing and transit into, those areas also actually just coincidentally tended to correlate to where higher income residents live. So job centers and higher income households seem to sort of go together in many cases geographically. Higher income households are less likely to use transit and more likely to generate high vehicle miles traveled. They drive a lot. And so that might be sort of diluting the effectiveness of the investing in transit in those locations. So again, this is maybe we want to rethink or relook at how we think about where we invest in transit related to where jobs are and where housing is. How do we think through all the pros and cons of different scenarios for coordinating transit investments with economic development and housing development? And that's a particularly important topic, I think, for this group, who knows the most about it. And then I mentioned earlier the need for safety countermeasures for anywhere where we're increasing the volume of bicycle and pedestrian trips. And then finally, to go back to what you were saying earlier, introducing a fee can be really powerful, but it has a lot of, pros and cons, like hitting lower income households harder, especially, if they have to drive. In some ways, the fee can be sort of helpful to households, lower income households that don't drive, that don't have access to transit, if they're able to get around easily. So basically, if you're in urban centers with good transit, the imposition of fees not necessarily a benefit to you, but it reduces a lot of the traffic around you. But the rural households is a different question there. So thinking about who should be at the table if that's going to be talked about seriously, and what are some of the countermeasures and strategies to make that solution something that's both effective in terms of the outcomes you want to achieve, but also fair and equitable. So this is just sort of the summary, of just sort of discussion topics that I would encourage you to ruminate on, today and think about as we move forward into the long range plan around these kinds of the topic areas out of what we're seeing from this scenario planning process. So I'll just stop there and see. Like there was one thing. I think that was just me. Main chat. Yes, and we can share the slides. Yep. So any reactions, thoughts people want to share at this point?
Okay, any questions, comments, follow up with Hannah on the presentation?
And I just wanted to say that was really interesting. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Did
No,
anything surprise you, Austin?
Some of the, I guess some of the decreases, especially related to cycling, but then as you said, housing and jobs just increase everything. And so if there's more of everything, there's going to be more bike crashes and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was wondering if to kind of to Kathleen's point about the certain like thinking more locally, I guess another future exercise could be how do you achieve the same percentage decreases in certain categories across the board with different strategies. So how do you decrease vehicle miles traveled in a rural area, not necessarily using the same levers that you're using for the study, but just something that came to mind, or maybe not vehicle miles traveled, but how do you increase bike usage by 4% or any of those categories by 4% or whatever with different kind of levers.
Right. And
what's more applicable to the area.
What's realistic and applicable, like John said, we already sort of stratified out so that whenever we pushed a lever that increased biking and walking intentionally, it was already assumed that that was only going to impact those shorter trips. So we weren't sort of just putting in a crazy assumption that everybody in the region was going to bicycle 50 miles a day. Although we'd certainly be healthy if we did. But yeah. So we tried to make it, somewhat nuanced like that. But I think one of the powerful things to use in this is that it's important to say reducing vehicle miles traveled is a great output, but it's not the single most indicator all the time that matters. I hesitate to say this in case lightning strikes me from the transportation modeling community, but it's where the congestion is, where the traffic is, and how it's impacting, what the outcomes are. So it's the combination of VMT plus emissions plus delay that I'm really looking for, because sometimes you can have, some higher, longer trips, but they're not necessarily generating a great deal of emissions, right? They're traveling smoothly, they're using electric vehicles, whatever. So yes, there's still wear and tear on the roads, but the MT ball by itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's where do we need to focus that concern in a way that it's compounding problems like emissions and congestion and delay. So I think that's also an important takeaway in terms of follow-up. So Luke, I think you had a question or a thought?
Yeah, I did. First off, just thank you for the presentation. It was super interesting going into depth on the different scenarios. But I guess I was wondering just for the bike and pedestrian crashes, I guess my understanding is that it's increasing just because, with increased transit, there's more people getting off buses. There's just more people making these trips. And I guess I was wondering if, and this might not really be within the scope of the model, but I know that when you have more congested roads and just more happening, the traffic speeds are lower a lot of the time. So I guess I was wondering if because of that, maybe more crashes are happening, but if the severity was maybe changing, or just if you looked into that at all.
It's a great nuance, and I particularly like the idea of trying to fine tune it with severity. That's a measure that I've used in other sort of performance evaluation. It's a little more sophisticated, but if you have the right data behind it, you can figure it out. But John, I'll kind of ask you to speak to that ratio or elasticity or relationship between volume and crashes and how it's impacted by different conditions.
Yeah, as Hannah mentioned right at the outset, that this tool is an open source travel model. It's slightly less sophisticated than the activity-based insight that's being used here. But as part of that open source development, the safety module is one of the more probably the later developed modules, and it really is predicated on that exposure ratio, and that's the limitation of it at this point, and it's related to the amount of person miles of travel that the individual is traveling. And if there's increased exposure, right now the presumed method in the model is that we've held a rate that we've established with empirical data today and kept that rate static into the future. So you've just identified that there's could be some feedback mechanisms to say, well, if travel speeds go down, that rate might come down. If we make X and Y investment, that rate could go down. The safety in numbers type of phenomena. So there's various improvements, frankly, that could be made. And at this point, we haven't taken that step, both in terms of the model development, but nor in this particular application. So I think that's an opportunity collectively that the model can be enhanced, and we can try to create those feedbacks to say if we make a conscious investment of improving our cycle infrastructure, then we should through crash modification factors or whatever it might be, see those rates decline in terms of the crash rates per person miles of travel. So that may give you a little bit, again, under the hood kind of explanation there, but I think there's really there's future opportunities to make this that much more helpful for us.
Thank you. Appreciate the detailed explanation.
And I know Matt has one more agenda item for y'all to get to, and I think you are just scheduled for 90 minutes, right? Yep. So, but I will just show you real quick, and I'm not going to walk through it, but we did develop a Tableau interface for these scenarios and for this data, both for the original set and for this smaller set. And so we're working with Zach to just sort of fine tune it, make sure it all is accurate and looks right, but you're able to kind of do similar to things to what Matt was describing earlier with the population dashboard, where you can just select one of these playing cards, if you will, these types of policy investments, like, pick just the bicycle and pedestrian investment policy and let the dial spin for a minute. And because it's a fairly complex model, the Tableau site it can be a little bit slow, but it's still worth playing with. But you get to see all the results, for all the measures you want to see from just picking one policy and letting it play out, both for everywhere, but also those lower and higher opportunity areas that I didn't get into much depth about today. But it's really it's fun and interesting, to sort of play with it. And so I hopefully will be able to share this along with the final report in September so that you all can have some fun taking a look at these things and raising some more questions and ideas.
Yeah, and I had just an observation, and Kathleen kind of touched on it earlier about the more rural versus the more urban. I mean, as we're using this tool and this scenario planning to look at the goals for the long range transportation plan, our region has some fairly rural areas that are very different than, the urban core. And so, the rural areas, especially like Queen Anne's County, we're going to have much higher commuter rates. We're going to have lower transit availability, if at all, compared. We're going to have no bike and pet options. We're going to have higher vehicle miles traveled. And then we're already paying kind of higher fees in the relation in ways of paying the gas tax and tolls. So, looking at some of the more rural areas, we have to balance those needs with kind of some of those core assumptions that we narrowed down to don't fit rural areas very well. So we just
and that's where I think
balance that out as we get our goals.
And I think the policy conversation during the long range plan process can really zero, one of the nice things is this tool lets you visualize that and kind of brings it up, and so for areas where the way America is, in a lot of places, everyone drives. That's how we built this country during the 20th century. So accepting that as a reality, but also all of the side effects of driving as it stands now that we don't want. How can we talk about strategies that still begin to mitigate some of those negative impacts without, penalizing or reducing accessibility, and mobility for certain populations? And what's realistic, like I said earlier, all vehicle miles traveled data, is not equally impactful. A long trip, if it's in a non air pollution emitting vehicle, it still has wear and tear on the roads, but you've gotten rid of your, sort of gotten rid of your emissions problem. You've transferred some of the emissions to another power source, but that maybe it's more about thinking creatively around policies to increase transit options, ride sharing options, style a ride, flexible, using on-demand transit, partnering with Uber and Lyft, whatever, for those pockets of areas where you really need transit, whether or not driving impacts the environment. And then other areas where maybe it makes sense to invest more in policies to promote electric vehicles and make it cheaper and make it easier. So I'm sorry, I think it was Rick, was it?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm curious, did you guys look into something like up and coming technologies like Waymo and robotaxis?
Okay.
Yeah,
John, if you want to speak to that, that was in the first round of scenarios where we sort of did an overlay on some of those.
I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of curious. I would think something like that type of technology, although not today, but maybe sometime in the future, might eliminate the need for mass transit. I mean, you have these little pods that carry people that they're basically using AI to maneuver around. You could have them where they could travel faster, travel closer, almost like little cars, like a train or something like that. So you kind of get into one of these robo taxis and kind of, I don't know, you kind of think of like the Jetsons or something like that, where they have these little cars kind of moving very quickly and close together and stuff. I'm just wondering if down the road, if something like that, the AI technology develops to a point that it would basically, you don't need trains and like light rail and stuff like that. You just hop in one of these little, you dial up like an Uber, you dial up one of these little pods that shows up at your house. You tell it where you want to go, and it
And that's
rushes you off
already
there.
happening. It's already happening in San Francisco,
Yeah.
and in some cities where we're beginning to get a little bit of actual observed data on, how much impact those things might have, positive and negative, right? So
Right.
you trade it off for congestion at the curb, with pickup and drop off suddenly becoming a thing where it didn't used to, right? So,
Right.
but it's those
But
technologies are not all as far away as we think, and it's
yeah,
going to change the way we think about transit.
that's what I'm kind of thinking, that they may eliminate accidents. I mean, these things kind of using AI to communicate to one another. They know where their location is. They know how fast they're moving. They basically avoid collisions. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're all using them now. I mean,
Right.
anybody who has a car a little bit not as old as mine, but when I drive the rental cars, that sometimes just avoid by themselves the car that just slowed down in front of me.
Right.
My car will slow down instead of
Right.
crashing
They
into
kind of takes over. Yeah.
So it's already being built in. And I know John and I actually worked with Federal Highway on a vision eval module that we used in the first part of this study, to try out exactly those kinds of alternative futures and see how it could impact us. So that's data that you have available that you can play with some more with Zach and the team over the coming year and years and fine tune it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think it'll be here a lot sooner than we think.
Oh yeah.
Hannah, I just wanted to provide a little context for for those that were talking about the fees and the impacts on rural areas. I agree with all of that. I did want to say that, the intent of this was to explore the potential impacts of these policy options. We're not recommending advancing anything at this point. It's really to see what might have a big impact, what might not have a big impact, and then what, the BRTB, who are, the decision makers, might want to look into more fully or analyze with the future UPWP project. So it's not about advancing a policy, it's about seeing what has the biggest impact and what might be worth exploring in more detail.
Exactly. And certainly for me, coming out of this, if you're going to explore a fee, don't go small. It's a painful thing anyway. So if the 2.5 cent fee isn't going to really boost the needle, if things that you thought might have an impact don't. If you're going to talk about it the right way. You also don't have to necessarily go to the big multiple fees and power it up, but it's looking like you could have an impact with something that did the equivalent of what the 5 cent VMT fee has. It's worth talking about, but there's a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, thanks, Zach, for putting that into context for everybody.
Sure.
Any other questions for Zach or Hannah or John? A lot of information there, a whole lot to absorb, to understand how, all those inputs go into that model and all the different scenarios. So, a lot to digest. So thank you very much.
And I definitely want to compliment Zach and Rahman particularly, and the team. There's been several applications of this vision eval tool around the country over the past 10 years, 20, 15 years. And this has been one of the most ambitious, and also pretty much homegrown. In many cases, other agencies have had RSG or a consultant team do all the work. And in this case, really Rahman and the team did the lion's share of the work, and we just supported it. So congratulations, because it was quite an effort.
Great. Well, thank you. And you'll make the slides available, and we'll distribute those. So thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is employment data, QCEW 2024, and that goes back to Matt for presentation.
All right. Thanks, Hannah and John, and everyone from BMC as well for chiming in with everything on that presentation. That was really informative. I am going to share my screen, and this is just a relatively quick update on the QCEW for 2024. Last or 2 Fridays ago, everyone should have received an email from me alerting you that the QCW data had been updated and shared for your individual jurisdictions. If this, we'll click through. There we go. So the quarterly files for Q1 through Q4 have been merged into a region-wide master file that will share every point level record for every jurisdiction. I have files that were shared that have it broken down by TAZs, but also in the raw format for each individual quarter with before those were appended together and then matched with their TAZs as well. So those are available in your shared files. I will get to that in a moment for your review and any changes, edits, anything that you need to do. We're aware that this has been used by some jurisdictions in the past for estimating employment, so we wanted to be sure that you had this at your disposal. Just a few notes, as this is my first time putting this together, so there's a few structural kind of adaptations that were done. The raw data, so everything that is included for all quarters, is included in everyone's individual jurisdiction file. This will also include those raw files and then the TAZ files as well. So those are geocoded at the TAZ level, along with census level geographies and individual point level coordinates. Within each file, the first contains the entire appended data for every quarter from 2024. So you'll be able to see the entirety for every employer reporting that their Q1 through Q4 data is there. And then I have it in a simplified structure, which breaks it down into a 12-month format with the yearly averages of employments across establishments. And the final sheet in each one of these Excel files is going to have all of the entries that I initially flagged for inaccuracy, largely due to extreme shifts in between quarters. That was the easiest way to flag it in the way that I processed it, but as always, I'm happy to take any inputs from members on different ways to clean these files or for presentation. So this is all done through our file sharing described here. You'll have the two files that I've included. There is the master file in Excel format, and then I also have it available in a zip file as well. I can provide it in different formats if you would prefer. Under the shared files that you have, it is under the QCW 2024 heading. This is how you will access it. I'm assuming that the majority of people have had this information. If not, this is it. Just for example, you'll go to this file exchange server here. Each jurisdiction has their individual file path, which will go behind this. For example, for Anne Arundel, this would be it. Once there, you'll be prompted for a login and username, which will bring you to those individual set of files. If you need an update on this, feel free to reach out to me or our RT coordinator, Spencer, and we can get an updated login or password information for you. Make sure that these file paths are working correctly and just make sure that you have full access to these files. Also included is a general guidance for review and edits that has been shared with these files before. So again, not an update there. And I also included the data dictionary so that for anyone who is looking at these variable names and they're very complicated, the data dictionary is going to be there to be able to refer back to that to ensure that you're looking at the right variables. There's also still all of the files available from round 10 forecast. No changes have been made to those. They are in that legacy location there. So all of those files are still available in that same shared file. And that is really the only update there. So for any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me. If it's with access, I can get you in touch with Spencer and he and I will figure something out for making sure that everyone has access. Any questions there?
Okay, so we need to go in, make sure we can access the data, make sure we can find the files. And then as far as starting to clean up the data, as far as is that, are we at the process now that we need to go
Yes.
in there and start looking at those large employers, making sure that their addresses are allocated to the right locations?
Correct.
Uh,
This is eventually what will feed into that updated master establishment file. So
Yep.
yeah, that's
And
why I
that,
included those initial flags.
and that's for the larger employers that will go in
Yes.
there and start looking at that. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And if we have any trouble, we just give you a call.
Pretty much, yeah. I am available for any type of access issues. I know it's a weird kind of format to receive them in, but obviously this is the way that we need to do it with it being restricted data. So we have to be sure that we're keeping all these files protected. But again, just reach out. It doesn't take much to get people connected back through.
Okay. Any questions for Matt on that?
I mean, I've already started to try to clean the data. There was a lot of zip code issues, city
Okay.
place issues, things like that. And so I only really have time to look at the large employers, but I'm not going to be able we're not expected to confirm any of the employment numbers because we don't have access to that, and that's confidential. But I'm having trouble. I did want to try to geocode it at the address
Okay.
level, and it's not, no matter what I try, it's not geocoding. So then I strip the confidential information from the file and send someone the addresses that has more expertise, and they're also having problems with the geocoding.
Okay.
So just to let you know, it's not, for some reason it's not geocoding, and she's someone that has a lot of experience, and so
Okay. Well, then I will definitely go back in and look at the files and see if there's something
or maybe
that
they
is.
have something in the file, or maybe it's too many
It's
at
possible.
once. So what I did was at the level of for my county, it's 5,000 plus when at the level of where you summarize all the quarters into an average.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm taking that file and then made a test file, stripped it of the salary and employee information, because it looks like the rest of the information is something that you can find, one by one on Google, things like that. So whatever's public, I kind of made her that file because then I can join the rest of the data later. So, I mean, I know I could show it on the map at the TAS level, but I really want to
Mm-hmm.
see it at the address level
Right.
to confirm it. And then I just realized that, I'm really I don't, have a lot of projects going on. So I'm going to focus on the top employers, with the largest numbers.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, let me go have a review of the file to see if there's anything up with that address level geocoding, and I can get back with you.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anybody else have any questions about the files?
Okay. If not, the next item on our agenda is other business. Anything remaining?
I do have
Oh,
the
I like
one.
oh,
Go ahead, Kathleen.
I saw the suggestion to change the meetings to the Wednesday. I prefer the consistent Wednesday because I don't always, you know, have everything marked, in the future on my calendar. And sometimes when I'm making appointments, I just know to avoid Wednesdays and avoid certain days that I know I have these meetings. It makes it much easier. So I vote for the more consistent, Wednesday meeting time if possible.
Okay, great. And that was going to be the next item. Is, as you said, through some scheduling mishap, the next CFG meeting is scheduled for Friday, October 24th. That obviously does not keep with our regular Wednesday schedule. So I did want to propose that we potentially either change that to Wednesday, October the 22nd, or we can change it to Wednesday, October 29th. I don't expect everyone to have their schedules available now. So I was going to propose that I share a Google poll with everyone to see if there is a preferred date for rescheduling, or we can discuss that now. I leave that up to you.
I'm good with the Wednesdays, and I think the Google poll makes it easy for everybody to be able to respond to you once they have a chance to look at their calendars.
Perfect. I will get that sent out with those dates, and we will see what is best to get that meeting rescheduled. And then once we have that finalized, I will reach out. I will change it on everyone's calendars and resend that invite to make sure that we have the correct date.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay,
And
any other business? Okay, if not, we've completed the agenda, and take a motion to adjourn. Okay, I'll make a motion that we adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much for everybody, and we'll see everybody.
And thank you so much. It was very interesting.
Alrighty. Thanks all.
thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.